Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this little guy right here. This is the HEAdesigns Hunter, the hair hunter, I guess. Whatever it is, it's an interesting sort of thing. But first, in the name of full disclosure, this guy was provided to me by the maker directly. Drop me a message on Insta saying, hey Nick, I want you to check out my latest design. Offered to loan me one my way, and it's a beautiful thing. No complaints there. However, it has been provided to me in exchange for the review. I told him, as always, I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, the ugly. Might be a gem, might be junk. He still sent it along, so brave of him, but there you go. Nevertheless, we have to understand that this means that this could be the very best quality controlled one of these ever, and I've done my best to not let this influence my review too much. So there you go. That's the full disclosure. You'll also notice that a bunch of these went to a bunch of reviewers, so I am, well, unwillingly perhaps a part of a social media splash plan, which, okay, whatever. But hey, that's the way knife making works these days, it would seem. So anyways, that's what's going on with this guy. The next thing, let's do a size comparison here. This is not a huge knife particularly. Here it is against the Ontario Rat number 2. Rat number 1 right here. See here, it's kind of right in that middle in size range, so to speak. Where is my Delica? Here is a Delica. Spyderco Delica. And so you can see, again, we're not so far off Delica's size. The handle's a little bit smaller, blade's a little bit, in terms of like functional working edge, a little bit longer, actually. But, yeah, they're both in the 3-inch territory. And actually, here, I'll measure it up just to see what the cop's going to say if he pulls you over. Yeah, we're under 3 inches pretty uncontroversially. And that's a beautiful thing, at least for some folks. Then finally, a note on the company itself. This is HEAdesigns. This is, I gather, one guy working out of New York, but he is, he works, does these designs and then has them made overseas. Just a really interesting pieces. He's got a very strong design aesthetic, and this is yet another example of that. He's the guy, actually, who you may recognize from my channel, had the S35VN flipper comb. That was a heck of a thing right there. So, it's nice to check out something else weird from the guy, which is good. So anyways, let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, the ugly of this little guy right here. So on the first, on the good side, that is, it's about 3 inches. That's a nice thing for a lot of folks, legally speaking. There are lots of laws around the world that maintain, or that require 3-inch or under blades, and it's nice that this is going to be able to suit that. No complaints there. Also, I'll say, 3 inches, legalities aside, it's a nice size, because I feel like that's enough to get a whole bunch of work done. But it's not so much that it starts getting, too intimidating to people. They're like, I hear all the sheepdogs, oh, you can't care about that. Well, yeah, you kind of have to sometimes. Alas, the workplace environment does not favor the Cold Steel Voyager XL necessarily in life, so you have to make do with what you can make do with, right? So anyways, that's beside the point. Next thing, this is a unique-looking knife, 100%. I mean, looking at this guy, it's kind of like, whoa. Because, okay, at some level, it's kind of a Bowie-style hunter blade, but then he's shortened this drop point, the clip point area up incredibly much. So, this is what we're used to, and this is also a little avant-garde. This is a Purvis Blades Primordial right here, but you can see here this is just this really up-swoopy sort of thing, combined with this fuller, combined with this little pattern on the handle here, which one of my viewers actually pointed out, it looks like the Starforge from the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic game, then, so that takes me back a little, but nevertheless, so it's got just that unique design to it, and actually it's kind of a part of his relatively consistent aesthetic of these kind of vaguely alien, crop circle-y sort of things. I mean, I like very much the fact that you can look at his stuff and be like, yep, that's him, and, that's always great. There's so many ho-hum knives out there that it's like, this is unique. If you like it or love it, or hate it for that matter, that's a thing. The other thing I got to highlight is somebody who is currently wearing a Batman mask is that this is shaped like a Batarang. You have this guy in your pocket, and it's sticking out of there, and people are going to be like, Nick, you have a Batarang in your pocket. You're like, no, it's just a knife, and they're still going to think you're Batman, but it's just a slightly different affair. So, I very much appreciate the Batarang look to this guy. That is something I have to appreciate. Next thing, this guy has a good build quality here. Whoever did this, and then frustratingly non-specific about factories, but whoever did this did a very nice job here, because you've got a lot of really nice touches. Not only is the machining done well overall, the action is great, all those kinds of things. But you got these nice touches like this on the clip here. The backspacer, by the way, is not only a full backspacer, which is nice, but it also has this little bit of extra machining going on here. I mean, design-wise, it's nice, and frankly, just construction-wise. The two-tonedness of the blade here, there's a lot of good stuff here. The action is great, as we'll talk about later on, so that's good. Next thing, this is a relatively lightweight knife. Let's go ahead and pull this guy, or put this guy, that is, onto your scale. Well, you're coming in 2.93 ounces for a little bit, well, actually about the same in terms of inches, and that's great. Ounce and inch is a nice lightweight sort of knife. No complaints about that whatsoever. And it's complete with the full back spacer with a blade that's relatively thick. I mean, it's pretty well done. And actually, the blade on this guy is quite good as well, which brings us to our next good issue. This is just a well done thing. I mean, the grind is done well. It actually comes down to a very, very thin edge, which I appreciate very, very much. It has a nice thin tip here, although that could be a little fragile for some people. If you're going to be prying, stabbing with your pocket knife, then okay, that could be problematic. But I think for a lot of people, this is just going to be a nice everyday cutting tool. Getting that edge in there on a couple of occasions, carrying this guy was quite nice. I appreciate that. It is a two-tone blade, like I said. You can see there's an area down here that appears to be maybe bead blasted, and then this area up here is sort of a machine finishy, satiny thing. So that's nice. And then finally, the blade steel on this guy is 154 cm. Not CPM 154, but 154 cm. Now, that's a fine blade steel. Is it like, oh my God, top of the rock? No. In fact, I would argue that that's sort of a... that's a mid-range blade steel these days. But at the same time, it is a fine blade steel. It's good to go for everyday carry. So, you know, there it is. So that's what we got going on here. Is the blade is very nice. Then finally on well, actually no, we'll just save that for the great. So that to me is the good here. Is we got a nice blade. We got a full back spacer. It's lightweight, nicely made. It has got a consistent aesthetic and a very unique aesthetic for that. Complete with a little bit of batarang action, and it is a very nice size, which I absolutely cannot object to. On the great side, to me, the front flipping on this is really, really nicely done. This knife, as you can tell, actually can be deployed in two ways. You can flick it out using your finger and this little hole right here. And it is, by the way, you have good access on both sides, so you can ambidextrously flick this if you are an ambidextrous human. But you can also front flip this guy. You got this little tab right here, and if you put your thumb up against it, and then slide your thumb back over around the top here, it will front flip the knife on out, and it is actually a really nice design in that way, not only because the detent is really dialed in for front flipping, but, you know, more importantly, sorry, I'm talking way too fast here, guys. It's been a long day. But anyways, more importantly here, there's a nice kind of height right up above the pivot here. You got your pivot down here, you got this guy, and that improves your leverage. Sometimes a front flipper can have just a little tiny bit of height above the pivot, and that makes it very, very difficult sometimes. You're either having to apply a lot of force or something like that, or there's not enough sticking up at the top there. No, this is a really, really good front flipper, and coupled with a very smooth pivot, by the way. Very smooth pivot, and this, it really is a pleasure to use. This is a front flipper that I really felt like is, it's pretty straightforward. And so I like that just a lot. This is a really, really nice front flipper, and the action on it is quite nice. And so to me, that's what's great here, is that this is one of the more pleasurable front flippers out there to use, kind of in the same ranks as like the Olamic Buska or the Booz Blade Smoke, in terms of its overall pleasurability as a front flipper. So on the bad side, we'll jump in. The fact that this design is, by being unique, it is also going to be polarizing. I showed this to the wife, and she said, oh my God, really? And to an extent, I see where she's after here. It is unusual. It is a little bit strange. But, you know, once you are bold, I mean, let's put it this way. You don't stick your neck out. No one's going to chop it off. But at the same time, no one's going to see you either. It's a bold move, Cotton. We'll see if it pays off. And I think for a lot of folks, it is paying off. And like I said, I'm right there on the fence. There were lots of elements of it I liked. There were some elements I don't like. One of the things I don't like, and this is sort of not about the knife itself, but I really do wish that there was a little more transparency on the factory here. He says very freely that it's overseas made, but doesn't give details on who. And now, look, at some level, I understand. You want to protect your supply. You don't want, you know, somebody else to come in and buy out the factory you use, and I get that. But at another level, especially from a smaller company that a lot of folks haven't ever heard of, oh yeah, they're being made in China is not a reassuring thing. There are lots of great Chinese makers, but there are also lots of really bad ones. And so, you know, okay, it requires a lot of trust. Here, the trust is warranted. This knife is made very, very well. There's no real complaints there. But at the same time, I really do hope that more small makers don't start doing oh, well, it's just made overseas, but we're keeping everything top secret, because generally that just means, oh, Well, that means you're probably not using anybody very good. In this case, it doesn't mean that, but I always want to see more transparency rather than less. So I hope that in the future he softens his stance a little bit and just puts on the fact that, you know, oh, this was made by we, or Rayot, or another company. That way you can build some trust with them too. I don't know. Whatever. Not a big deal. Getting on to the bigger deal here. You've got over here in this exposed lock bar relief area, not only is that an area that's going to kind of grab at your pocket a little bit as you slide this clip down onto it, but it's also a little bit sharp in and of itself. It's not unchamfered, it's not terrible, but it is definitely a sharp area on the knife and is something I could definitely see smoothed out a little bit. Next thing, the G10 on this guy. Now, look, I understand this is what happens when you kind of do because you can see here, by the way, that this is a curved piece of titanium and a curved piece of G10. It's not just flat G10. But you can see all of the individual lines in the G10, and honestly, it looks a little bit funky, a little bit plasticky. This is such of a futuristic knife that I'd almost like to see a full titanium version. I know that he's maybe trying to go for a slightly lower price point, but to me, that feels like a little bit of a miss. I'm not necessarily a big fan of this. There is a carbon fiber version, though, that is really attractive, but 20 bucks more. So the G10 on this isn't really doing it for me. Next thing, this is a very shallow carry. Not necessarily, but you can see here, this is the highest extent to which your pocket goes. So at any given moment, this is going to be hanging out of your pocket like a batarang. And depending on where you're carrying it, like I have a pair of pants that has a very deep key pocket that I'll occasionally throw my knife into. That way, it doesn't matter if it's pocket pecker or anything like that. But the problem is, if I like sit down and then lean over, this is going to be poking at me very much, as opposed to on a knife with a more conventional clip where if it's just sticking up this much, there's really not that much poction going on there. So I'm not a huge fan of having all of this sticking up out of there. It's bold, but I don't think it's the kind of bold I want to see in my life. So there's that. And then finally on the bad side, the price on this guy feels so-so. It's 200 bucks for this model right here with the G10, and it's 220 bucks in carbon fiber. Now look, at some level, like I said, it's a nicely made knife. It's well designed. It's not like, oh my God, you're ripping my face off. But the thing is, it's G10, it's titanium, and it's 154 cm. And to me, that was a little bit of a, oh really? Like, because when I got it, it was like, hey, really nice knife. I wonder, oh, there's no steel marking. So I asked the maker, oh, well, what's the steel? He said 154 cm. I said, oh, CPM 154, you mean? He said, no, 154 cm. Oh, okay. And then I asked him, so what are the final production ones going to be made out of? Figuring he was just, saving a couple of bucks in the prototypes. But no, that's what it's made out of. Now, look. 154 cm is a fine steel. It's good to go. I'm not going to the knife is not bad as a result of that. But the simple fact is that the knife market is hyper competitive right now. Everybody and their mother has made a knife in the $200 range. And the simple fact is that for the majority of those knives, 154 cm was 4 or 5 years ago. A lot of them have moved now on to things like S35 VN or even M390 at those kinds of price points. And although 154 cm is a fine steel, and hopefully it's done well, heat treat. I didn't do like full-on cut tests with this guy because I'm not beat over at Cedric Ada. But nevertheless, it's fine. But in a world that is so damn competitive right now, it's really getting harder to cut a corner at 200 bucks, and that does feel a little bit like a cut corner to me. So, like I said, I think the price on this guy is okay. And the fact that particular steel choice, although it's a fine steel, you'll like the knife, there's no big issue with it. When every other knife in the vicinity, price-wise, is bringing a little bit more, you kind of have to bring more, even if you're bringing a weird design as well. So, to me, at least, that was a little bit disappointing. And frankly, I would have rather paid, 200 bucks or something for it in M390. If that, well, it is 200 bucks. 220 for it in M390 or something like that. And, seen a little bit of a step up, because as it is, that just feels like an, oh, well, all right, whatever. But not a huge deal. So, to me, at least, that's what's bad here, is that the price is so-so, and especially with that steel choice, which just feels like a cut corner, and 200 bucks is the territory at which cut corners aren't quite so great. It is a shallow and pokey carry. It is, I'd like to see some full titanium here. I think it would make the futuristic feeling of this knife maybe a little more compelling. The G10 looks a little funky here. There is a little bit of minor sharpness down up in here. I wish there was a little bit more transparent on the factory, and that's another thing that would help to justify a higher price. And it is a love it or hate it sort of design. So on the ugly front, honestly, there's nothing really ugly here, and I want to actually back up a little bit. So the 154 cm thing, now for a long time, that was an upgraded steel. I mean, I remember the days where it was like, wow, Leatherman moved to 154 cm, amazing! So at that level, it is a fine thing. But again, it's just all about competition. It's all about what exactly are you trying to, who are you up against, etc. And in this case, that's where it comes down to, and that's where I'm always evaluating tools. So I'm going to try and put that aside, but the simple fact is that was my emotional feeling, and maybe that's more emotion than anything. Consider your source, consider your steel snobbery, consider the bias, but that's what I mean. So on the final conclusion front, at some level, it's a really nice little knife. I mean, when I first got it, it was like, okay, wow, this is weird as hell, but it's kind of compellingly so. And it really is weird. I mean, look at this. This is a really unusual aesthetic. He's got the damn Starforge on the front of it. It's like some weird sci-fi techno Bowie knife. But it's also not a bad everyday carry knife. I mean, you can throw it in your pocket and it's pretty carryable, shallow carry accepted. It's got some nice design touches and an action that is really, really impressive. It's a very nice front flipper and it's made beautifully. And there's a whole lot of joy in this guy. I like all of that a fair amount. But the problem is it's also going to be a little bit controversial. What with the design is, well, not something everybody's going to fall in love with. The G10 doesn't feel super like it suits it. The price is not as strong as many in the market. And honestly, the carry is quite shallow. And for me, at least, that ends up being the factor for me. When I was thinking, okay, do I want to pick one of these guys up? Honestly, that was the biggest thing. It was like, man, I wish this guy carried a little, because it just like was constantly poking me in the side as I'm, carrying it. And so that's what kicked it out for me. But I'm also, really picky, a little snobby, all those kinds of things going on. And that's kind of what it comes down to here. Ultimately, I think that whether you want this knife or not is entirely about the design. HEAdesigns is literally, design is in the name. This is a design brand. And so if you're looking at this knife and you're thinking, oh my freaking God, I need this. I need a crazy fancy Blade Runner Hunter in my life, then by God, go ahead and pick one up. If you're lusting after this design, you will love this knife because it is a very nice functional tool. It is in a very absolutely fine blade steel. No matter my steel snobbery, it is going to be fine there. And you will very happily pay the price that you need to pay for this because no one else is making a crazy Blade Runner Bowie knife. In that regard, if you're liking the design, I think you will absolutely love this knife, and it probably will even end up being a gem. It would be a whole lot more gem-like at a lower price, better steel. But nevertheless, I think, for you, if you are in head over heels with the design, you will absolutely love it. However, if you are just after a knife, if you are a person who walks up to me and says, Nick, I want a knife, and your question in value comes into it and things like that, I think that you can get a little bit more, actually, I think you can get substantially more for a little bit less from a couple of other makers. I think I'm thinking of like the Mass Drop, Spyderco, all those kinds of folks. Who else is doing good work? Wee, Kaiser. You can get a whole bunch of stuff these days for $200 that, excels this guy in some of the relevant parameters. But ultimately, like I said, if you are after something that looks crazy like this guy does, and you're loving the design, then absolutely you could be very, very happy with this little guy. And I think it could very easily leave you. This could be what you've been huntering for all your life. See, I was trying for the pun, and I found one there. So anyways, there you go. I hope this helped you get ahead in life and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.